Good morning, this is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. PsychicTarot.ca, book your tarot reading and unlock your spiritual journey. And the Pepper Master, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids and cubs, and welcome to Season 5 and episode number 864 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. Oh, Canada, always 100% Canadian. Today, recording day is Tuesday, March 17th, 2026, and it looks like it's a beautiful blue sky day here at the Beaver Lodge. I'm your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A, and not with me, as usual, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. A big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Pepper Master, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and PsychicTarot.ca. Kids and cubs, how is your mental health today? Mine is doing fairly well, I have to say. Had a little difficulty getting started this morning, but given that I kind of woke up in a good mood, I wasn't actually experiencing any frustrations as a result of it. I just sort of accepted it and surrendered to it and said, "Oh well, that's the kind of day it's going to be." And yeah, so I'm in a good place. I was right yesterday, by the way, about winter coming back for one last scare. Maybe this won't be the last one, but yeah, we did get a certain amount of snow and some unpleasant weather yesterday evening. We were thinking of going for a stroll, and we thought, nope. When the snow sort of falls in the direction that sort of goes like directly in your face and feels like it's like little blades and stuff. We were having that yesterday, so we decided to not do that, not subject ourselves to that, and we almost we're looking at perhaps purchasing some type of a gazebo or something like that for the backyard, so that we can spend more time outside, but still have a little bit of shade. And maybe Versviti was thinking of bringing the table out and putting it on the deck so that we can measure and see what footprint we would need for it. And then, of course, just leave it there. And it's like, we can't leave it there. It's going to snow again. So the thing will rust. And sure enough, a couple of hours later, it started snowing again. So it was a good thing that we didn't do that. Oh, man. I tell you, Canadian winters, eh? And springs in particular. But yeah, I'm seeing everybody's talking about that here. It's very windy in Burlington, apparently. Really windy yesterday where Kit Linda was. Lucky I didn't end up in Oz on my way home. Yeah, it's true. The wind did pick up yesterday. And yeah, Kit Tim says just a 40-degree change in about 18 hours. Yeah, yesterday when I went out to the bus stop for my curling match, it was veritably balmy. It was 9 degrees Celsius, felt like -5. But I'm sitting there. It's like, I don't think I need my scarf today. Oh, by the way, another reason that you're a beaver sweetie, you're beaver sweetie. I'm talking to you like I'm talking to talking to my beaver sweetie. Your favorite beaver is in a good mood is because we have some breaking news from the Beaver Lodge curling report. Do, 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 do. This just in. My curling team won its match yesterday, which means we finished on top of the rankings of Division C for the last round of the year, which means, if everything goes according to plan, that next year we should be curling in Division B. We went up two divisions in one season in only our third season together. Cha-ching. I tell you, it's the new curling shoes. It's the new curling shoes. So yeah, we had a great game yesterday. Opened with a five, so that was kind of brutal for the other team, and then I just went on to play defensively like we needed to in order to get the win. The other team played a good second half, though. I mean, we did end up, winning only by 7-6, so it got a little closer than we thought it would be. But the defensive strategy did work in order to actually secure the win. So there you go. Yeah, pretty surprised. Didn't think that was going to happen this year when we started together. I was hoping just to move up one division somewhere to see. But the last round, the previous round, we finished on third place or something like that, and we thought, if we could just get that one more win, that one critical win, and we did get it this round, and so yeah, we're moving on up. Hopefully, we're not moving on up to be in time for the playoffs, because then we would be bottom of the pool if they take the first two divisions. Hopefully, we still get to do the playoffs in C and D, but yeah, we might be moving up a division. So yay us! Pat, 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 pat. It means we are, if we're an A and B, we're one of we're in the top half of the league. So one of the better teams, it would appear. Yay! uh, Getting some inspiration from our wheelchair curling team and our women's national team, who's so far perfect at the World Championships and playing against, I believe, Italy later this morning, which hopefully I will have an opportunity to watch later today at some point. And then I think today is one of their two game days. So I think they're for the next 3 days. I think that they're playing the first match of the day and the third match of the day, where they are. I believe the World Championships are taking place in Calgary at the moment. Um, so yeah, that's going on. Like I said, it was a great day yesterday, and woke up in a great mood today. So yeah, feeling good, and I hope you are as well. Thank you for sharing in my joy, Elaine. Yay, way to go. We hurried hard. We used the hip check along. No, no, no. There's no hip check in curling. When the ref wasn't looking. Hey, Mildred had it coming. That's all I'll say. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay. I did not, I did not, I do not hip check senior citizens when we play curling. Oh my god. That's about the only way curling would get into the X Games is if they introduced the hip check. All right. Oh my word. Yes, we have a show for you today, Kids and Cubs. First of all, happy St. Patrick's Day for all of you who are actually are Irish or just a little bit Irish on the day. I'm guessing that somewhere um, in this weird mix that created this weird mix of DNA, that there's got to be some Irish somewhere, because a brown guy doesn't get a name like Douglas Connors unless there's a little Gaelic somewhere in there. I would assume. Uh, I never did my 23andMe type thing, and good thing now, given what we know about the how the results were kept safe, and probably not something you should do in terms of a DNA test to give that type of information to a private company. That that's always seemed like a little bit weird to me. So yes, but I assume that with a name like mine, there's a little Irish in there somewhere. Uh, maybe way, 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 way back. All right. So yes, and of course, I would wear green today, but because of the green screen, I kind of disappear. You'd literally, I guess, see whatever image is right through me. So I didn't do that, but trust me, inside I am wearing the green. All right. Let's get into today's show, Kids and Cubs. There are lots of topics for us to tackle today. Again, grab bag, but we have the Prime Minister who's ending his time in Europe, at least his official time on duty, before having a vacation, quote unquote, as vacation like as it can be when you have a 24/7 on call job as the leader of a G7 nation, but he's going to take a couple of personal days here. And by the way, belated happy birthday wishes to the Prime Minister, who celebrated his birthday yesterday, it seems. And that made me think about it. It's his birthday was literally a few days from the day he won the Liberal leadership last year. I think he got the leadership on March 14th and his birthday was on March 16th. So that was a nice birthday gift for him last year. And this year he got to spend some time for his birthday, a little bit on working, but meeting at Buckingham Palace with King Charles. So that was something, according to well, it's a video, so that's not an article. I need an article, hopefully. Um, but yes, he was at Buckingham Palace yesterday afternoon. There's some pictures of them shaking hands and stuff like that. Not much in terms of a readout from what I can see here. Uh, but let's go to the Wimbledon Guardian here, some British press. 16th of March. Do we have, no, it's the PA News Agency. Here it says the King has met Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney during the politician's visit to the UK amid the deepening Middle East crisis. Charles had held an audience with Mr. Carney, a former governor of the Bank of England, at Buckingham Palace on Monday afternoon. Well, it's interesting that they didn't say King Charles, they just said Charles. The two men were photographed shaking hands on the 61st birthday of the foreign leader, who earlier in the day held a meeting with Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. Sir Keir discussed the situation in Ukraine with his Canadian counterpart in Number 10 on Monday morning. He thanked Mr. Carney for Canada's invaluable support for the Coalition of the Willing, the UK and French-led initiatives to provide security guarantees for Ukraine as part of a peace process, and the US Israel strikes on Iran and Tehran's retaliation against Gulf states have left the world facing rising energy costs, and NATO countries have been challenged by US President Donald Trump to help defend shipping from Iranian attacks. That's literally all it says, that they met. It was the Prime Minister's 61st birthday. So, yeah, doesn't seem like there's much news coming from that. Usually, uh, there isn't, um, because conversations with the royal family uh, are usually just that, private, without much, if any, revelation about what was discussed. Uh, However, if we're looking at island social trends, this is another site here. It says top issues concerning the UK and Canada certainly do include Canada's sovereignty in the face of economic attack from the United States of America, issues of military concern regarding the Middle East, the need for continued alliance regarding financial and defense support for Ukraine and its endurance of attack by Russia, and broad global issues of security, including the impacts of artificial intelligence. When Carney arrived in London yesterday, he was greeted by Canada's new High Commissioner for Canada, which is former Liberal Cabinet Minister Bill Blair, who started the job just last week, telling media that he got his credentials on Wednesday, March 11th. Blair told media yesterday that this is Carney's third visit to the UK as Prime Minister. Carney became Prime Minister in March 2025. Of course, Carney was resident in the UK during 2013 to 2020 when he was the governor of the Bank of England. Yeah, and there you go, of course, with him saying that he's taking a couple of days off with his quote, that he will remain, quote, as connected as always. There you go. Right. So, yeah, not much from that, and of course, not much additional readout from what the Prime Minister has been doing on his time in Europe. The last thing that was out was a joint statement on the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, because that is spilled over into Lebanon. And it was a statement by the leaders of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom on that escalating conflict. It states here, we are gravely concerned by the escalating violence in Lebanon and call for meaningful engagement by Israeli and Lebanese representatives to negotiate a sustainable political solution. We strongly support initiatives to facilitate talks and urge for immediate de-escalation. Hezbollah's attack on Israel and the targeting of civilians must cease and they must disarm. We condemn Hezbollah's decision to join Iran in hostilities, which further jeopardizes regional peace and security. We condemn attacks directed at civilians, civilian infrastructure, health workers, and infrastructure, as well as the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon. These actions are unacceptable, and we call on all parties to act in accordance with international humanitarian law. A significant Israeli ground offensive would have devastating humanitarian consequences and could lead to a protracted conflict. It must be averted. The humanitarian situation in Lebanon, including ongoing mass displacement, is already deeply alarming. I don't know if we're witnessing the beginning of the Gazification of Lebanon, but yes, there's a lot of rhyming, including the displacements here. We reiterate our call for the full implementation of UNSC Resolution 1701 by all parties and support the efforts of the government of Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah, prohibit Hezbollah's military activities, and curb their armed hostilities. We stand in solidarity with the Lebanese government and people who have been unwillingly drawn into conflict. And that's all we got from the Prime Minister. Interestingly, in a situation like this, when we have very little from the Prime Minister coming around to fill the airwaves, and it's sort of been a bit of a lull day um, on the issue of a war with Iran. I mean, there's still lots of stuff going on, especially from the United States, because they have to change the narrative every couple of seconds in order to keep people destabilized and to not allow for a how would you put a direct and fulsome telling of what's going on there to happen. We even have the chair of the FCC, I think his name is Brendan Carr, who's been creating a lot of trouble for a lot of people lately, threatening to pull licenses of certain media and news stations, even though all of them are being bought up pretty much by friends of Trump, in order to eliminate any embarrassing or unflattering truth about what is going on in Iran and the success of the United States or lack of it to be fully reported. So that's happening over there. I think that there was something yesterday that came out. I think it was a democracy rating or something, and it was stating that the United States had tumbled down uh, the rankings. Um, Not sure what it is. Looking at trying to find it off the top of my. It was just something I heard in passing on the news, and I forgot to take a source. Um, but the United States had dropped several points um, and is not considered uh, one of the most democratic nations anymore. In fact, it's being classified as a flawed democracy by the Economist Intelligence Unit, ranked as of early 2026, ranked 28th um, as the in terms of where it stands as being a democratic nation. It gets a 84 out of 100 score on global freedom and 73 out of 100 on internet freedom from a place called freedomhouse.org that I guess measures this type of stuff. But yes, the United States um, being recognized as a country with very, very, how would you put it? Um, Decreasing levels of democracy. In fact, there's another place called the VDEM Institute, which categorized the United States, and this is by late 2025. This doesn't count all the things that have happened since, as an electoral autocracy at the moment. That's absolutely interesting. This is something here from the University of Gothenburg, and it's the VDEM Institute as well. It says nearly a quarter of the world's nations are going through democratic backsliding or autocratization in 2025, and 6 out of the 10 new autocratizing countries. That's a hard word to say fast, autocratizing. Countries identified in the 2026 Democracy Report are in Europe and North America. Among them are large and influential countries like Italy, the United Kingdom, and the USA, according to a report authored by a team led by Professor Stefan I. Lindberg at the VDEM Institute at the University of Gothenburg. Quote, the fact that many populous and economically powerful countries are autocratizing is especially worrying. Several of these countries have the economic and political weight to reshape international organizations, norms, and trade, effectively reshaping the global order. I think we are already seeing the effect of that, says Stefan Lindberg. 3 major trends in democratic backsliding that the report has found, and these are clear patterns in the current trends of democratic backsliding. The first one is the democratic backsliding in some traditionally stable democracies. The second is significant reversals and often breakdown of democracy in countries that successfully democratized during the late 20th and early 21st centuries. And thirdly, the deepening of autocracy in already autocratic states. Freedom of expression, a core aspect of democracy, shows the most drastic global decline and is the most common target among autocratizing leaders over the past 25 years. Quote, the second most common target are the liberal aspects of democracy, like rule of law and checks and balances that prevent the abuse of powers, which are deteriorating in a worrying number of countries. For example, rule of law is deteriorating in 22 countries, including the USA, says Stefan Lindberg. Democracy in the USA deteriorating at an unprecedented scale and speed, even, he's claiming. Stating here that the United States democracy is currently in a much faster deterioration process than any other democracy in modern times. Within only 1 year, the USA's score on the VDEM Liberal Democracy Index has declined by 24%, while its world rank dropped from 20th to 51st place out of 179 nations. This was the report I heard about yesterday. The liberal aspects of democracy show the largest decline in the US President Donald Trump's second term can be summarized as rapid concentration of powers in the presidency, according to the report. Quote, the current US administration has been undercutting institutionalized checks and balances, politicizing civil service and oversight bodies, and intimidating the judiciary alongside attacks on the press, academia, civil liberties, and dissenting voices. And if you think that sounds familiar, particularly if you're living in Alberta or in Ontario, where the premiers there seem to think that judges should either be directed or elected, where they are changing laws on democratic things, changing laws with regard to gifts they can receive, changing laws with regard to how the freedom of information legislation applies to them. Yes, this is doesn't only seem to be a global thing, it seems to be a particularly global conservative thing. Since elections are only national election years, there has not been a change in those indicators in 2025 for the US. The 2026 American midterm elections will be a critical test for the quality of elections and democracy in the United States. If election indicators are also declined, the US will fall even further. On a more positive note, the report shows that 18 nations worldwide, or 10% of them, are currently democratizing, with large countries such as Brazil and Poland continuing their democratization processes. In the majority of these countries, media freedom is improved. Botswana, Guatemala, and Mauritius are the 3 new democratizing countries identified in the 2025 data. And if people are interested in looking at the data a bit more, it is called Unraveling the Democratic Era, with a question mark at the end. And it's available for download from the VDEM website. And I will include that link here in the chat for the kids who are watching. Oh, wow. Interesting. Since we're talking about this type of stuff, Uncover the News just posted here because there's an introspection of sports and politics often. Venezuela defeated Italy tonight 4-2 in the World Baseball semifinal. Really great. Good things are happening to Venezuela lately. I wonder what this magic is, says Trump. Of course, what Trump is, because Trump considers himself the president of Venezuela. But what happens if Venezuela defeats the United States in the final? Mm, that'll be interesting. Who's he going to cheer for? I have Kid Bucky here saying, I watched a lot of curling over the Olympics and Paralympics, some outstanding performances. The gold medal shot by Mark Artisan was one of the best I've ever seen. Right? Right? Ah, just fantastic, fantastic, and how it came and how it all came to be and all that kind of stuff. Oh, it seems I was fuzzy for a little bit there as well. Oh well, hopefully I'm back to less fuzziness. I can't seem to get the light right here. There we go. That's a little better. I'm washed out on this side here a bit. All right. So yes, um, United States sliding on democracy indexes. Um, that's not good. And but what is good here in Canada is the Conservatives sliding in public opinion favor. Um, Now, here's one of the things with a lull day, a little bit on Iran. Not a complete lull day, though. There's a little bit of stuff that we have to report to you. And the Prime Minister's uh, international travels coming to an end for a little bit. And you can't, how would you put it? He's not going to be in the press at least for about a week, at least about around, maybe a little less than that, unless he's called on to be. You would think that this would be prime time for the conservatives, for example, to try and get some of their messaging out because there's a little less competition. And considering that their leader is in the United States, apparently doing this big outreach tour, there was nothing yesterday really in the press about him. They let a whole day go by, and in fact, not only did they let a whole day go by, but the main story that was in the press about uh, Pierre Polyev or the conservatives yesterday still had to do with the whole fallout from their proposal that Don Cherry should be elevated to the Order of Canada, which is a very, very weird play, considering that um, the Conservatives have alienated a fair bit of people, but they seem to have been going out of the way to not alienate Francophones, or at least people from Quebec. And they torched that. Now, one of the reasons they've torched that is because they are leading. There was an MP that led this, but then Pierre Polyev put his support behind it. Now you got Premier Danielle Smith putting her support behind that. Don Cherry being elevated to the Order of Canada. And as we mentioned yesterday, this is not going over very well in the province of Quebec, given all the things that Don Cherry has said about francophones over the course of his career, but is also not going over very well in English Canada because of all the things that Don Cherry has said about people who are not male, not white, not straight, not uh, well, pick the group you want over the course of his career. So while he may have done some good things, um, is he the type of person that we would elevate to this particular order? Number one. Number two, uh, nominations for this particular order are done by Canadian citizens, sent into a committee, and a committee, nonpartisan committee, makes decisions. This whole process is supposed to be nonpartisan. Politicians of all kinds should literally just not be suggesting names for the Order of Canada, even less organizing campaigns for this. The Order of Canada actually, when people nominate Others ask them to not share publicly that they have made a nomination. So they're going against this in every way, shape, or form. But not only they're going against this, uh, they've decided to alienate Quebecers by doing this. There doesn't seem to be much gain for them other than shoring up red meat vote. Anybody who supports giving Don Cherry the Order of Canada is probably someone who already votes Conservative. Not all of them, but probably a lot of them. There's not much more population base to gain. They risk alienating a whole lot more people. It's unpopular in French and in English Canada, and that is the story. The party clearly decided to let stand yesterday when it should have known, or its people should have known, that there probably was not going to be very much for the Prime Minister yesterday, given that he was meeting with King Charles and, well, the discussions are not really reported. So it would appear that the Conservative Party of Canada preferred having news about their push to make Don Cherry a member of the Order of Canada and their alienation of Francophones and other Canadians be the story of the day rather than what Pierre is doing in the United States, which should probably give you an idea of how well things are going for Pierre in the United States. Because nobody would choose this to be the story unless they are really, really desperate and really are feeling that they might be slipping with the base, and then decided that it was more important to protect the base than to have a positive story about Pierre out there for the general public to consume, which would be a sign of how well things are going for the Conservative Party of Canada and Pierre personally. Either way, it's not good. Yesterday on Power and Politics, CPC pundit Kate Harrison had a couple of things to say about this, which struck me as a surprise because on the past couple of shows, I've actually heard her make a few comments that were actually reality tethered and not as partisan as she seems to be. And I thought, oh, maybe there's a slight change in tone. But with this one, clearly that is not the case here. Um, it would appear with the by-elections coming in Terrebonne, in one of the three ridings, but Terrebonne, the one in the Quebec, where we kept on wondering before Laurie Idlett made the floor crossing, because that was the one that would determine whether or not the Liberals would get to 172 in a majority or not, whether or not the Conservatives would campaign actively in that riding or try to slide the Bloc Québécois a couple of cards under the table at the poker table where everybody's cheating. And well, it would seem that potentially one could look at this Don Cherry thing as exactly that. The Conservatives raising this type of ruckus to give the Bloc Québécois an issue to rally around in the Terrebonne by-election. But despite the fact that this by-election is somewhat moot in the determination of 172 or not, if we assume we assume the orthodoxy, I guess, that the two seats in the GTA will go to the Liberals. Why it is that the Conservatives would still be doing this is a bit of a mystery. But it seems that they are somewhat all in on the decision that, again, rather than trying to make their tent larger and more welcoming because they need to grow, still doing the purity test thing. Here's Kate Harrison explaining how she sees things with regard to all of this.
Others who are considered a flight risk, I'm not sure why you would do this. on the flight risk, because we've all heard the chatter about more floor crossings in the offing potentially. Some of the names that are being bandied about are Quebecers, right? These are people who potentially could join the Liberals, leave the Conservatives. Is there, I mean, it seems kind of crazy, but is it a possibility that Don Cherry is what passes the Liberals over the majority government threshold by drawing Quebec Conservative MPs over to the other side?
If the relationship with Quebec caucus is so fragile that something like a fellow caucus mate nominating Don Cherry for the Order of Canada is what pushes you to break ranks with your party, turn your back on your constituents, and join the government benches, I would suggest that person probably had some other motivations
Tenuous ties already
for wanting to cross, and that's where I would disagree with how much of a feature or not this is likely to play in the by-election. I'm not a Quebecer, and so I won't pretend to think and feel the way that they do. There are a lot of really big issues that are facing Canadians right now. The price of gas among them, the price of groceries among them. That too will feature in the minds of Quebecers when they cast their vote in Terrebonne. And I just want to pick up on something Brad said about kind of the diversity of perspective and thought, because a lot of Don Cherry's historical comments have been brought up in relation to the story and the nomination. We had a very recent Order of Canada recipient who said that Canadians who support Israel lack basic human values. Order of Canada recipients may not be politically correct. They have very diverse thoughts. Certainly, I don't agree with that perspective, and people might not agree with Mr. Cherry's. In the case of Mr. Cherry, it doesn't make him less of a great Canadian.
Yeah.
All right. So we got the whole shebang with that one. If there are caucus members who are thinking that this Don Cherry thing, just a mere fellow colleague making a recommendation that somebody should be brought into the Order of Canada, if that's enough to make them jump ship, then I suspect they have other motivations. Keep pushing them out, Kate. Keep pushing them out. Wow. Number one, this is not just an MP suggesting that someone be elevated to the Order of Canada, which an MP should not be doing and should know better than to do. The fact that he did this, the fact that he is politicizing the nomination process should get him wrapped across the knuckles by the party leader, should not have, and the pundits, and should not have the pundits turn around saying, well, if some people want to leave because of that, well, I suggest that they have some other motivations, and that's not all that it was. Yeah, and given that you've had 3 people that have left already and there's buzz that there is still more, the fact that that's the reality should indicate to you that, yes, there are other motivations and maybe you should not be giving them a reason. Maybe you should not be seeing whether or not this is the drop that makes the glass spill over or the straw that breaks the proverbial camel's back. Wow. Just and then, well, there's other people that received the Order of Canada and then, takes out the example of someone who said something anti-Israeli because the Conservative Party is always, always, always pandering to Canada's Jewish community as if they are the only ones that support the Jewish community or think that shooting at synagogues is wrong. In conservative land, the rest of us are all cheering for that, apparently, or something of the sort. And then, of course, throwing in a little bit of campaign stuff. I think Quebecers, I wouldn't say that I'm a Quebecer, but I think Quebecers are more concerned about the price of gas and all of that kind of stuff, which is, of course, going to be Carney's fault, not the fault of the guy that started a war in Iran with no planning, no procedure, no end goal, no exit strategy, no friends, no allies. She works hard for her money. So hard for it, honey. But yes, apparently the Conservative Party still feels that they have the luxury of pushing people out. On that front, Rob Russo made a comment that you heard a little bit of the end of a previous comment there, as that clip was showing, where he was saying that he, doesn't really understand why it is that the party would do this, and it does, but really not in sense. There doesn't seem to be too much into it, too much in it for the party on its surface, unless, like I said, um, unless we're at a save the furniture stage. But there's another comment that Rob Russo makes near the end of this segment that I want to show you because it goes to something that we say on the show often with regard to introducing noise into a debate when you don't want noise. Right now, the conservatives should be wanting the focus on their party of being on Pierre, being in the United States, doing statesman-like things.
Pierre Poilievre is in the United States trying to get attention to, I think, an interesting initiative about Canada-U.S. relations. This is not what he needs at this moment. Mm-hmm. This is not what he wants to be talking about. It deflects attention from that, and for that reason alone, I'm not sure what tactically or strategically this brings to the Conservative Party.
Good point. Okay, let's leave it there. Thank you to the power panel.
And there you go. Basically saying, without saying the words, this is noise that is being introduced into what should be the PR objectives that the party is pursuing at the moment. And it's actually incomprehensible why this would be put up at this time. It's almost a bit like that MP who went rogue by asking Parliament to somehow create a system just for him where the legally mandated and authorized pay raise that he would be getting as an MP, that all MPs would be getting. Well, he doesn't want that. So just find a way to not put it on my check, even though the system does not allow for that, and neither does the law. And did so without telling all his other MPs, which caused media to run up to them with microphones and say, will you give up your raise too? Will you give up your raise too? Do you support him? And a lot of people didn't necessarily want to give up their raise or be put in that position to be asked that question. And then that guy turned around and says, well, I'm not going to keep quiet. I thought that this was the right thing to do, so I did it anyway. Because things like that happen when you have control of your caucus. So this might be another one of those things. Maybe the party did agree with it and let the MP go first and put it out as a trial balloon and see how it landed. Decided to support it or not support it as a result. But yeah, not the smartest move on the part of the Conservatives, PR-wise, if their goal is, if they wanted the goal to enlarge the tent, but we've seen nothing from them that seems that that's the case. It seems that really they do want, they just want a politically pure party. So they want to be right on all things all the time and have everybody tell them how right and brilliant they are about all things at all time, which of course usually leads, as the saying goes, the cost of being right is often being alone. So they want to be right. So they want their supporter base to be as pure as possible, but that also means as small as possible. Oh well. Oh well. Yes, Kit Linda. People who do things because they're the right things to do don't go around boasting about it. That's true. All right, kids and cubs. What else do we have on the menu for you today? Lots of news today. So yes, since we're talking about people who are not nice to people on the way up, Donald Trump experiencing what happens to people when they're on the way down after they have not been nice to people on the way up. Donald Trump, who has won the war in Iran at least 7 times, I think, so far, and doesn't need anybody and doesn't need anybody's help, came running hand to the Allies. Once again, first it was Ukraine, of course, to get help with the Shaheds, and now it's to all the Allies and everybody who's affected by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran. Um, you all need to help us. You all need to help us open up that strait. As good allies, you need to do that. It's in your interest, we are told. Donald Trump is also finding out that he is alone. The word would go, according to of the Globe and Mail. Hold just something in my way. There you go. U.S. President Donald Trump is caught between two very powerful forces: the Iran war's worsening economic fallout and his own colossal ego. More than 2 weeks after the United States and Israel first launched their attacks on Tehran, the conflict has caused the biggest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Way to go, Donnie. With Iran effectively shuttering the Strait of Hormuz, choking the flow of Middle Eastern fuel, crude prices have jumped 40% since February, and the costs of food, electronics, and household items will soon follow, not to forget fertilizers as well. It's bad enough that over the weekend, Trump took a belated stab at coalition building, demanding other countries send warships to help reopen the waterway. Yes, because after spending the last year or so insulting everyone and doing things like, for example, removing the flags representing each one of the fallen Danes who fell when the last time and first time and only time you invoked Article 5 and any NATO nation invoked Article 5. After 9/11 and the war in Afghanistan, taking the flags out of the Memorial Garden at your embassy in Denmark, pissing all over their graves, doing stuff like that, threatening to annex Greenland, threatening to annex Canada, going into a war without talking to any of your coalition partners, and then the war that could have dragged them in somehow. Yes, you have the luxury of then demanding that other countries send warships to help reopen the waterway that you were not smart enough to figure would probably close. Boo Boo Kitty, you don't have the luxury of making demands. But demanded little President Fauntleroy did as he stomped his foot. Or I should say President Fauntleroy, President Lord Farquaad, as he stomped his foot. But by yesterday afternoon, he had junked the whole notion with that their services were required. Quote, "We don't need anybody. We're the strongest nation in the world." Yeah, that's why you were standing by the side of the road, hiking up your skirt, trying to hitchhike a ride. Because you don't need anybody. Trump insisted at a White House event. He instead positioned his call for outside help as a way to gauge the loyalty of American allies. Quote, "I'm almost doing it in some cases not because we need them, but because I want to find out how they react." Oh yes, Donald Trump trying to save face here. I put myself out there on international 4K 24/7 international news TV, asking for your help, demanding that you help me, because not because I need your help, no, because I wanted to see how you would react. I was just testing you. We don't really need your help. Mm-hmm. Sure, Jan. Sure. Well, they didn't react with a ton of enthusiasm. Germany came out with the bluntest rejection of military aid in the Strait of Hormuz. Quote, "This is not our war. We did not start it." Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said yesterday, before wondering what Trump expected from a few European ships, that, quote, "that the mighty U.S. Navy cannot manage alone." Stefan Cornelius, a spokesperson for German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, was quick to remind reporters, quote, "Washington explicitly stated at the start of this war that European assistance was neither necessary nor desired." The foreign ministers from France, Italy, Spain, Greece, and Poland all ruled out any role patrolling the Straits. So did top officials from Australia, Japan, Luxembourg, and the European Union. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer hedged a little, saying he was working, quote, on a viable plan to safeguard maritime traffic, but no details were provided and no decisions have been made. Starmer then emphasized that his country, quote, will not be drawn into the wider war. Several outlets have reported that Trump vastly underestimated Iran's willingness to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. Not so, the U.S. president repeatedly said yesterday, quote, he was clear all along that the route would pose a major challenge. Quote, I knew about the strait, that it would be a weapon, which I predicted a long time ago, he contended. Trump then noted for good measure that he also, quote, predicted Osama bin Laden would knock out the World Trade Center 1 year before exactly I wrote it in a book. That's not actually true. Missing from all this prognostication, though, was any sign of how the current war could end. He sidestepped a question about what a deal in Iran might look like. He did say he was open to talks, but immediately added that, quote, we don't even know their leaders because everyone on the White House's radar has been killed. Quote, we have people wanting to go negotiate, Trump said. We have no idea who they are. Trump bullshit to English speak. We have no one to negotiate because Iran has said so much. They told us to go pound sand. Iran is not interested in negotiating anything with the United States. In fact, Iran is on the record saying something like, we were negotiating with the United States on the nuclear deal before all of this happened, and what did it get us? To go back in the room to negotiate a nuclear deal already when that's what we had before he tore it up the first time? And this is what we're getting? Why would we do that? There's nothing in it for us. See, the thing about making deals and then unilaterally violating them very shortly after they are signed and showing no willingness to be a good faith negotiating partner makes it such that when you do stupid things and you need to extricate yourself from having painted yourself into a corner, the person with which you need to negotiate because they have something that you need for that to happen, if only for you to claim victory and save face as you exit out of the corner from which you painted yourself in. When you poison the well so much that the other party is just not interested to come to the table to help negotiate, giving you what you need so that you can save face. I think the expression is, you be fucked. Should have been a little nicer to people on the way up, Donnie. Maybe you would have the help. Maybe you should have thought that you were the smartest person in the room or that only you could do it. Maybe you shouldn't have told people that they don't have anything that you need. Because guess what, Boo Boo Kitty? They took you seriously this time. Just ask the Germans. European officials weren't particularly satisfied with that response. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadepool told reporters yesterday that it's crucial for the U.S. and Israel to define, quote, when they consider the military aims of their deployment to have been reached. His Estonian counterpart, Margus Chakna, echoed the desire to understand Trump's strategy better. Quote, what will be the plan? It's hard to say. The rationale for Trump's attack on Iran keeps shifting, as does the time frame for any sort of U.S. withdrawal. Trump has variously said the campaign would last 2 or 3 days, or perhaps a few weeks, or maybe a month and a half. Last Friday, he landed on a new schedule altogether. The war will be over, he told Fox News, quote, when I feel it in my bones, which ironically is the whole reason the war started. He felt it in his bones that Iran would attack. And which very curiously aligns with another thing that he said previously when somebody asked if he has any guardrails or things that would restrict him. And he said he was restricted by his own morality. Considering he doesn't really have any. What does that say? Oh, Lord. Yeah. Not fun. Not fun. Things are not going well for the United States On other fronts, financially would be one of the ways. One of the things that we keep on telling you, kids and cubs, is to look at the bond market and stuff like that. And one of the advantages that we have as Canada is the fact that we have a prime minister who does understand the bond market. I hope, kids and cubs, I'm seeing myself on my screen here there for a second as I'm moving from articles, and I seem to be freezing now and then. I hope that that's not what you are seeing at your end. As I'm going from article to article, it seems that the computer is hard today, and which is really weird. So yeah, but anyway, I will bring you this information here. Whoops. We don't need that. Thank you very much. There's nothing more annoying than bringing up an article. And then when you do, you have like this huge pop-up right in the middle of the screen. And of course, it never shows up right away, right? It's like reading or something, and then it pops up. This is from Fortune magazine, according to Jason Ma, who's the weekend editor there. The AI capital expenditure boom has created a gush of corporate debt, forcing the Treasury Department to make its bonds more attractive to investors as the U.S. war on Iran adds to the deficit. Last Tuesday saw the single busiest day on record for U.S. corporate bond sales as President Donald Trump hinted that the war may end soon, briefly calmed markets, and sparked a mad dash for companies to issue fresh debt. By the end of the day, total investment-grade issuance topped $65 billion, exceeding the prior one-day record of $52 billion in 2013. The flood of debt was led by e-commerce giant and AI hyperscaler Amazon, which raised $37 billion, sources told the Financial Times. That beat the company's guidance for $25 to $30 billion as investor demand far outpaced the available supply, attracting about $123 billion in orders. The corporate debt surge was enough to move the needle in the Treasury market, where daily trading volume exceeds $1 trillion. Analysts at Deutsche Bank said in a note last week that the bond sales added some upward pressure on the 10-year yield, which climbed 6 basis points to 4.16 at session highs. Apollo chief economist Torsten Slok previously warned the flood of corporate debt could make borrowing more expensive for the federal government. In a note from January, he pointed out that Wall Street estimates for the volume of investment-grade debt that's on the way in 2026 can reach as high as $2.25 trillion. That's as the AI boom increasingly sends companies, including hyperscalers and adjacent firms, to the bond market to fund massive investments in data centers and other infrastructure. Quote, the significant increase in hyperscaler issuance raises questions about who will be the marginal buyer of IG paper, Slok said. Will it come from Treasury purchases and hence put upward pressure on the level of rates? Or might it come from mortgage purchases, putting upward pressure on mortgage spreads? Much has changed since January. The Iran war is shaping up to be a prolonged conflict that sent oil prices spiking. In turn, bond yields are up on exceptions of higher inflation, further adding to borrowing costs. Bombarding Iran every day also adds stress to the deficit, which hit $1 trillion in just the first 5 months of the fiscal year. Pentagon officials told lawmakers last week that the cost for the first 6 days of the war topped $11.3 billion, according to the New York Times. Meanwhile, IQ-47 has vowed to boost defense spending to $1.5 trillion a year from $1 trillion, threatening to further blow up the deficit. The unsustainable trajectory of U.S. debt has raised growing alarms on Wall Street, but for now, investors appear to have a strong appetite for both corporate and government debt. Days after Amazon's mega offering at auction Thursday for $22 billion in 30-year Treasury bonds drew solid demand, though it was helped by the jump in yields since the war began. And a Treasury offering last month saw the highest demand ever in the history of the 30-year auctions, led by overseas buyers. The bottom line is that Treasury auction metrics show that there continues to be very solid demand for the long end in U.S. Treasuries, Slok said in a note February 20th. So while demand for the Treasuries has not decreased, the yields, however, has increased. So how much the government needs to pay people in order to get that, in order to be able to acquire those treasuries. It's taking a look here at the last date for February, which was February 27th, I think, because I think everything started on March 1st. The 30-year U.S. Treasury yield was 4.633%, and today, just a few weeks later, it's at 4.854%. So that's up a little more than 2/10. 2/10. Ah. Yes, we are a little 2/10. 2/10 in the space of about 2 weeks, which is a pretty decent jump there. The other bit of news that's not going very well for the United States uh, when we are talking about finances, nation, um, is here that according to CNBC Markets, is that the bonds from the government are having their safe haven status tested as the war drags on. This is from Chloe Taylor, again from CNBC Markets. Global markets have been turbulent since the first U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran at the end of February, as soaring oil prices have weighed on equities and even so-called safe haven have been dragged out into the volatility. Government bonds, which are often used to hedge portfolios against riskier assets like stocks, have been no exception. Bond yields and prices move in opposite directions. Developed market governments bonds are typically seen as stable investments that can hedge portfolios against volatility in equity markets. So yields typically fall if stocks decline sharply as investors flock to safety. But in the initial aftermath of the U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran, bond yields spiked as sovereign debt joined the sell-off gripping stock markets across the globe. Developed market bonds have largely tracked equity sell-off since the start of the war. Yields have suffered wild swings and diverged from movements typically seen among safe assets during a stock market downturn. By last Friday, trading of developed market government bonds was muted after another volatile week. Oil prices eased slightly on Friday but remained elevated as President Donald Trump said the U.S. has, quote, unlimited ammunition and plenty of time. In other words, this could be a forever war to continue the war. And U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth brushed aside concerns about the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. Global equities were mixed, with moves in the European and U.S. stock markets far less turbulent than they have been in recent sessions. On Monday morning, oil prices were on the rise again after Trump administration ramped up pressure on allies to help safeguard the Strait of Hormuz, and investors reacted to threats facing Middle East export facilities. International benchmark Brent crude futures with May International benchmark Brent crude futures with May delivery traded 3% higher at $116.18 per barrel, while U.S. West Texas immediate futures with April delivery advanced 2% to reach 166 cents. 5 and 10-year yields on GILTS, GILTS, UAK government bonds were each 2 basis points lower at 4.8 and 4.3% respectively. In a note on Thursday, Luke Hickmore, investment director for fixed income at Aberdeen Investments, said government bonds had, quote, defied safe haven status since the conflict began. This, he said, is because of the sharp rise in oil prices, which feed directly into transport costs, heating bills, and the price of moving goods around the economy. When oil prices rise sharply, inflation risks rise with them. Even if headline inflation had been easing before, higher energy costs put a floor under how far and how fast inflation can fall, he added. Bond investors care deeply about that. Bonds pay a fixed income if inflation turns out higher than expected. Those payments lose purchasing power. If inflation turns out higher than expected, those payments lose purchasing power, investment director, fixed income at Aberdeen Investments, Luke Hickmore, said. He also said investors were now demanding a higher return to compensate for the potential loss in purchasing power, which is why yields were largely on the rise, pushing bond prices lower alongside the equity sell-off. Quote, in the past, geopolitical shocks often drove yields lower as investors rushed into government debt. This time is different, he added. The shock is coming through energy prices and inflation, not through a collapse in demand. When inflation is the problem, bonds do not provide shelter. Wayne Nutland, investment manager at Shackleton Advisors, said that although various factors influence returns, bond and equity returns tend to be negatively correlated during periods of negative growth shocks, when economic growth falls below expectations, pushing bond prices up and often dampening equity valuations. Quote, the ability of bonds to deliver positive results during periods of economic weakness is why they are often referred to as safe havens, in addition to the lack of credit risk for government bonds, he told CNBC in an email. But he noted that when higher inflation is a driver of market returns, bond and equity returns often move together. Higher inflation concerns push up bond yields, driving bond prices lower, and also impact negatively on equity returns via lower valuations and or fears over lower earnings, Nutland said. There's little mystery to what is happening right now in markets. The sudden spike in the oil price following the military action in the Middle East is resulting in higher inflation forecasts, leading to bond and equity returns becoming more positively correlated. Hope is not a strategy, Tony Meadows, head of investment at BRI Wealth and Management, told CNBC that patterns being seen in the bond market reflected the fact that, quote, so far the inflation worries are beating the growth worries. And again, I'd like to repeat there, hope is not a strategy. And if you listen to what Pierre Poilievre has been saying a lot in his speeches, a lot of it is based on hope. Equities are also recovering, which tells you something about fear, Meadows said. Uncertainty doesn't always drive investors to government bonds. He said if economic growth was put under pressure by the war and higher energy prices, then monetary policy action could fuel demand for safe haven assets, including bonds. But he noted that this trajectory was not guaranteed. Quote, in this instance, a cessation of hostilities puts rate cuts on the table, but that might be curtailed by lingering inflation if there's a risk premium in the oil price, Meadows said. So fear with inflation might curtail safe haven buying across the curve. Lauren Hislop, fund manager at Mattioli Woods, warned against making premature assumptions about how the conflict might evolve. Quote, she noted that yields had retreated sharply when oil prices fell earlier this week after Trump suggested the war could soon be over. Quote, traders rushed to reprice a swift central bank pivot, she said, noting that the bond market on Trump's word was, quote, effectively betting on a clean, contained war. The problem, every one of those assumptions remains deeply contestable, she said. Oil is elevated, the war's duration is unknowable, and inflation risks haven't evaporated. They've merely been temporarily ignored. As the old adage goes, hope is not a strategy. So, yes, there could be some turmoil in the U.S. Financially and its ability to wage this war and that type of stuff, particularly, I guess you could say, formerly allied nations or still tenuously allied nations uh, decide that it might be in their interest to sell some U.S. government bonds or debt as this is going on. So yes, things not going super well for the U.S. On that front. Again, nothing horrible yet or seismic, nothing that would probably change the credit ratings at the moment, given that demand is still good. But yes, when you have that much debt, you have a guy who's bankrupted 6 casinos running the treasury like it is a casino, willing to throw countless amount of money, wanting to expand a defense budget that's already $1 trillion by 50%, and without any means to pay for it, particularly since his tariffs scheme, where he was basically imposing trickle up, taking money from the Americans least able to afford it and trickling it upward to the billionaire class. And now he's got to repay some of that money, according to the courts, of course. But Trump has this long-standing history for stiffing people he owes, so I wouldn't be counting on that check coming anytime soon. But yes, technically, the funds are not there anymore because those tariffs, at least the ones that were deemed illegal by the Supreme Court, those needed to be refunded. Which then makes it such that the United States has to borrow more to fund its follies. At some point, there's only going to be so much that they can borrow before the world starts getting nervous and credit ratings start to be affected, which will then really send the yields skyrocketing. Speaking of inflation, back home, there's a little bit of news about it as well, because as we mentioned yesterday, inflation numbers were going to come out, and they are surprisingly good. A lot of that has to do with the cutoff date by which this report was taking place, given that everything started March 1st, and these are numbers for February. The effects have not started showing up in the prices that were evaluated here. But going into what will be somewhat of an inflationary shock, According to Jenna Benchetrit of CBC News here, and based on Statistics Canada data, of course, Canada's annual inflation rate fell to 1.8% in February, Statistics Canada said on Monday, with the end of last year's, quote, tax holiday reflected in the year-over-year numbers, but the Iran war still missing from the picture. February's inflation rate slowed compared to the same time last year as prices when the GST break ended mid-month, the data agency said in what economists refer to as a, quote, base effect. Food prices saw the biggest slowdown, driven by slower growth in prices for fresh and frozen beef, but Stats Can notice that grocery prices have risen more than 30% since February 2021. Gas prices, meanwhile, recorded a smaller decline, 14.2% compared to the same time last year, mostly due to higher prices for crude oil in the lead up to the war in the Middle East and some disruptions in oil-producing countries. Gas prices are likely to jump in March, according to the report. However, the full brunt of the war's impact, which began on the last day of February, won't be reflected until next month's inflation report. One economist expects gas prices to skyrocket as much as 15%. That would be, quote, well above a year ago levels, driving headline inflation towards 3% in the coming months, wrote Douglas Porter, chief economist at the Bank of Montreal, in a note to clients. So basically, what we're telling you here is that the inflation number here is 1.8. In a couple months, you could probably expect to see 3%. So again, when the conservatives start running around with their hair on fire and saying, oh my God, this is all the fault of Mark Carney, know right now that this increase has to do specifically with gas prices resulting specifically from Donald Trump's folly and has absolutely nothing to do with the prime minister. If you've been following the polls, you know that the Liberals and the prime minister are doing very well at the moment. They're leading the Conservatives by a significant amount in most public opinion polling by double digits. According to the polling aggregator 338, it's a 9% lead when you put everything together. The 338 aggregator is showing that if an election were held today, the Liberals would score more than 200 seats and would have about, I think it is a 92 seat spread or something like that, or an 82 seat spread with the Conservatives, as opposed to the thin minority that they have now and maybe soon to be a very thin majority. I shouldn't say thin minority, I should say a very healthy minority and possibly thin majority to come. But the real test for the numbers for Mark Carney and the Liberals will come when the double hit of general cost of living increase from the increase in oil prices and gas prices, because that affects everything, including shipping, and then the hit to food inflation in particular as a result of the hit not only for gas but also fertilizers works its way through the system, whether or not that is going to create an environment, as people are struggling, for the Conservatives to come in again with their simple old solutions, axe the tax, like they did the first time, and that will be enough to make people swing. And that's why I recommended yesterday that it might be a good idea for the Prime Minister to have an announcement in his back pocket ready to go about what it is that Canada will be doing with some of the additional revenue that we are getting from royalties and other things of the such from the increasing price of gas, or whether or not he would even impose an excess profit tax on oil and gas companies for this particular time and have a way to redistribute some of that money to people who are going to be very adversely affected by the rising cost of gas and the rising cost of food, particularly in an income test, preferably in an income tested manner, and preferably with it weighted more heavily to people at the bottom of the economic pyramid. While the GST break clouded the headline number as the war looms over next month's report, the Bank of Canada's preferred measures of core inflation, which strip out volatile components like gas prices or tax changes, actually moderated last month. CPI common dropped from 2.7% to 2.4%, CPI median dropped from 2.5% to 2.3%, and CPI trim dropped from 2.4% to 2.3%, bringing each of the measures closer to the central bank's 2% target for inflation. So basically, before all of this started, we were winning that war against inflation. Food inflation was tough, but we were winning that war against inflation in general. And all of that has just been shot to hell with what Trump has done. Quote, with most measures of core inflation close to the bank's 2% target, policymakers can more readily look through the oil-driven spike that is surely coming to headline inflation in the next few months, wrote Porter. And that is particularly the case with employment weakening even before the war and the uncertain fate of the USMCA trade deal still looming. So wanted to bring you that information about inflation and how it all fits into what's going on globally. Um, Along with that, kits and cubs, um, there has been some commentary. If you watched Power and Politics yesterday, Don Drummond was who used to be one of the chief economists, I believe, at TD, now the CD Howe Institute Fellow in Residence. He had some insights on the inflation numbers and with a couple of other uh, base adjustments that we could be expecting over the next little while that could be happening. And that could make the numbers put a spike that other parties could try and run with and take advantage of for partisan purposes to try and get you to believe that what's going on is the fault of Mark Carney specifically here. But these are like with the employment numbers. What we told you yesterday that there was a spike in unemployment, but a lot of that not unemployment but job losses. Um, Part of that was because there were some work permits, 315,000 work permits that would be expiring and not being renewed. And well, when those are renewed, you have that many fewer people in the workforce. Hopefully, the work still needs to be done, and those are jobs that could be open to people who are more local, I guess, if they are jobs that locals would like to take, but and that the jobs are not necessarily disappearing, just the people who occupied the jobs not being counted anymore because their work permits have not been renewed, and that will create some type of base level shock in those numbers. Don Drummond here is talking about two other factors here that may lead to similar situation in inflation numbers. So to let you know what they are going to be before they happen so that you are pre-inoculated when they do from the BS that will certainly be thrown your way. And so here it is, Don Drummond, sir. Kids and Cubs.
Around the economic impacts of this conflict, we turn to economist Don Drummond, who is a Stauffer Dunning Fellow in Global Public Policy at Queen's University. Hi, Don. Thanks for coming on.
You're most welcome.
So this inflation reading from Statistics Canada today has many caveats, of course, but on the surface, it looks like good news, right? Inflation cooled to 1.8% in February, so prices were, about 2% higher last month than they were in February 2025. What's your read on the figure that was reported today?
I think we need to do what the Bank of Canada does and look at their special three underlying measures, because the last month, February, was half tainted because we had that temporary GST holiday on some things. So that kind of messed up that number a little bit. The other half of it's going to come off when we get the number for March. And then when we get into April, now we're going to have the entire year of not having the consumer carbon tax levy. So the numbers are pretty difficult to read as the headline numbers. The Bank of Canada looks all through that. They look at underlying trends. They have their own three measures. They've been bouncing. They were in the low threes for a long time. They just barely dipped in the high twos. They're now all in the low twos. They're either 2.3 or 2.4. So not quite at the bank's target of 2%, but very close, finally, after years.
You mentioned March. There's the potential for an ugly figure in that month because gas prices and what they've been up to over the last little while, they're up, 30 cents a liter or so in some parts of the country as a result of what's going on in the Middle East. Are you anticipating an inflation shock as a result of the Iran war?
Well, we're certainly going to get that in the measured rate. The rate for March unambiguously will be at least 2.25. It could be even 2.5. We will get a high number in April as well, because now the elimination of the carbon tax has been off for 12 months, so that's in the base. So we're looking at 2 consecutive months of 2.25 to 2.5. Now, that is a relative price change. It's one thing driving it, is price of oil and natural gas showing up in the gasoline at the pumps and in home heating. It's not generalized to the rest of the economy. If it doesn't spill over to the rest of the economy, for example, if it doesn't lead to higher wages, it too should fade out if and when the oil price comes down, or it'll even fade out if the price stays up for a number of months. So I think it will be a relative price change rather than a permanent increase in the rate of inflation.
All right. So Don Drummond here, letting us know that there are two extra events. What we talked about in the previous article, because of the GST cut that had put in place, half of it was accounted for in the month of February. The second half will be accounted in the month of March because of the date at which it fell. I think it started around Valentine's Day. I think it was last year when they did that, or just in time for Valentine's Day. The other thing is, of course, the reduction or the elimination of consumer carbon pricing, because the annualized number is a rolling number where the latest month gets dropped off and the most recent month gets put in. When numbers for April come in, that will be the last month that the drop in the price of everything, because of the reduction of carbon pricing at the consumer point, had been eliminated. That's when the effect of that disappears from the annualized number. So with that, there could be a jump. Don Drummond here is saying that the headline number is now about 1.8. You might be able to see 2.25, maybe up to 2.5. So let's say next month it does jump from 1.8 to 2.5, which is a 0.7 increase. That's a lot. Right? The 0.9 is 50% of 1.8. You know, you can have people that went up almost 50%. In 1 month, because that's the way conservatives like to do math on these types of things. If that happens, it shouldn't be a surprise, given these things that are being factored out of the number. And when you add, of course, the shock of what's going on there, it would appear that, according to Don Drummond, that the impacts of that may be higher in other parts of the world, that depend more on oil that comes out of the Strait of Hormuz, specifically, because there's not only going to be a price shock, but there could also be a supply shock, given the sheer quantity of the oil that is needed. That is probably going to be I think he's going to talk about that in the next answer that I have for you there from this interview. Next clip I'm going to be showing you from this interview. But all these factors together, it's going to be no surprise that the rate of inflation is going to be rising, particularly over the next 2 months. He seems to believe that it might not be a structural type thing, especially if this war could be wound down fairly easily. But there might be some complications with that. So I'll give you back to him right now, so that he can explain a little bit from his perspective how the price in the oil, price of gas, how the increase in the price of gas will somehow factor in.
On the issue of oil, obviously oil prices are a boon for Canadian producers and the governments that collect royalties and taxes, but it's painful for consumers, right? It exacerbates the cost of living pressure that many people are struggling with right now. Do you think that this oil price shock is a net negative?
Well, in a very static world, it should be a net positive. We are a net exporter of oil and natural gas, but there's a but behind that. We're also the quintessential small open economy. And this is really serious business for Southeast Asia. We keep talking about 20% of the world's supply of oil and natural gas goes through the Strait of Hormuz, but that is the source for Southeast Asia, the Indias and the Vietnams and the Chinas. So it's not even a question of just the price. It's a quantity of effect. You just can't get the quantity of it. So if it weakens those economies, that will weaken their production. It will weaken their ability to buy our exports. So there's knock-on effects. So I don't think it's a crushing effect for the Canadian economy, but I don't necessarily see it as a positive sign. But as you indicated, all kinds of distributional effects. If you're an oil or natural gas company or you own shares in this, yeah, that's on a net positive basis. But the rest of the country is a net consumer of oil and natural gas. Another hit on household budgets where they're already being stretched.
Yeah.
So there you have it, kids and cubs. While it could be good for the government itself, given how it is invested in oil, if you are a net consumer of oil, which most of us are, it could have hit us pretty significantly there. And that's why I was suggesting that it might be a good idea for the Liberals to have that in their back pocket when people start feeling the squeeze. Hey, we have something for you. And while this is going on quarterly, you will be getting this to help you deal with that. And if the government could do that, that could prevent some type of shock. It could suffer in public opinion. Similar a bit in a way to the way that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Liberals reacted very quickly during the COVID crisis to ensure that people would be kept whole. This might be a way to do it, but as opposite to COVID, given that we were sheltering at home and we weren't using very much oil and gas at that time, the corresponding price spike didn't really happen as is happening now. I think there was a time, if you remember, during COVID, where the price of a barrel of oil was selling at a negative because they didn't want to shut down production because it takes so long for it to come back online once you do that. But nobody was buying enough of it, so they needed to pay. They needed to basically pay people to find places to store it. To avoid having to shut down the wells. In this case, we are getting a spike in the price of oil. That does give the government some additional resources to be able to help people, again, assuming that those additional resources are not wiped out by overall effects to the economy should the crisis spill over and start showing up more broadly throughout the entire economy. With regard to that, there's an article here in the Financial Post by Bloomberg News' Wayland Soon and Alistair Gale that can give an idea of the complications here with regard to the Strait of Hormuz when it comes. Of course, it would not work. It worked the other day. It is not. I should have read it yesterday. I had brought it up and yesterday to hopefully be able to bring it to you. And the show was going a little long, so I decided to skip it. And today it seems that it is behind a paywall, which is not particularly helpful. There's some great articles being written out there about what the reality of bringing oil back online after all of this, that it would take several weeks and perhaps even several months because, just where the bottlenecks are, and like I said, the difficulty of the lengthy process that it is to either shut down something oil or to bring it back online. And it was giving a more realistic, and I hate to hazard a guess here, but it was more than things will be fine in just 2 or 3 weeks. It could be up to months. Once this starts, and the longer it lasts, the longer the come down from it is, because at some point, if they are still pumping the oil, and they do have to go somewhere, you might have a whole bunch of tankers that are sort of floating around filled with oil, but maybe not able to unload them, or just a whole bunch of tankers that cannot be used for that purpose. given that Iran does not consider them tankers from friendly nations or non-enemy nations, if you would put it that way. So unfortunately, I cannot bring you the actual situation from that article, but there's another one here from the Globe and Mail that might provide that similar information. This is from John Leicester from the Associated Press, based in France. Here it says the rising prices. Let's try that a third time. The rising prices causing winces of pain at gasoline pumps are due in large part to the impact of the Iran war on the Strait of Hormuz, a crucial passageway for oil and gas from the Persian Gulf. The narrow waterway off Iran's coast, now effectively closed by the war, is so vital for the global economy that governments are working on blueprints to speedily reopen it to shipping when the shooting stops. In Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron is leading an international effort to unblock the energy choke point so oil, gas, and goods could flow freely again, quote, when circumstances permit. He envisages countries using warships to escort tankers and container vessels through the strait when fighting is no longer raging so intensely, whenever that may be. And one of the jokes going around the interwebs at the moment is that given Trump's request for a whole bunch of other nations to help him with that, is that the First Nations military who said no to Donald Trump was the United States'. That's probably an idea he presented by the Navy. Hey, well, why don't you just escort the ship? And the Navy said, yeah, we're not going to do that. That would be a really dumb idea. And then Donald Trump decided to go out and ask the world, just to test them, of course, not because he needed help, just to see how they would react. That didn't go well. Former naval officers who have served in the Hormuz Passage are intimately acquainted. Yeah, I'm having trouble again. Former naval officers who have served in the Hormuz Passage and are intimately acquainted with its waters say vessels would be sitting ducks with little room for maneuver in the strait's narrow shipping lanes if foreign naval forces attempted to reopen the waterway before cessation of hostilities. Quote, in today's context, sending warships or civilian vessels into the Strait of Hormuz would be suicidal, French Navy retired Vice Admiral Pascal Hausseur said in an interview with the Associated Press. A ceasefire agreement with Iran, quote, would make the situation shift from suicidal to dangerous. At that point, military ships could be deployed and then escort operations could begin, he said. One of the reasons it could be dangerous, if you remember, the Houthis, I think it is, in Yemen, definitely were attacking certain ships at certain times before this blockage of the Strait of Hormuz had started. French, American, British, and other naval crews already have valuable first-hand experience of fighting off missiles and drones in the region. Here, they're going to talk about it right now. They have escorted and defended cargo vessels through attacks in the Red Sea carried out by Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. French frigates used machine guns, cannons, and sophisticated air defense missiles to fend off Houthi strikes. French frigate Alsace downed 3 ballistic missiles in the Red Sea in 2024 as it was escorting a container ship. The ship's commander at the time, Captain Jérôme Henry, told the AP that being on the receiving end of potentially deadly strikes was unnerving and exhausting. The sea battles also took a toll on U.S. Navy ships and personnel. Quote, there were repeated attacks either by drones or missiles, Henry said in an interview. The crew didn't get much sleep. French retired Vice Admiral Michel Olhagari, a former head of France's Center for Higher Military Studies, says that, quote, all navies learned a great deal about working together and escorting ships from their Red Sea missions and have also drawn on Ukraine's experience against the Russian barrages of missiles and drones during Moscow's war. Quote, it would allow us to deploy to that region with fairly refined know-how and a high level of cooperation, and that is extremely important, said Olhagari, who commanded a French frigate that patrolled the Strait of Hormuz during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. Iran is militarily far better equipped than its Houthi proxies in Yemen, which wrought considerable damage and disruption in the Red Sea. Armed by Iran, the rebels targeted more than 100 merchant vessels with missiles and drones, sinking 2 and killing 4 sailors between November 2023 and January 2025, and greatly reduced trade flows. Iran can reach all of the Strait of Hormuz and its approaches with anti-ship cruise missiles that it developed off Chinese-made weapons, according to mapping by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency. It can also target vessels with longer-range missiles, drones, fast attack craft, and naval mines, which it used during the Iran-Iraq War. U.S. strikes on mine-laying Iranian vessels in the latest conflict underscore the gravity of that danger. With war raging, the Hormuz Passage is very, very dangerous, and the risks for shipping are much greater than in the Red Sea against the Houthis, al-Hagari said. The means to counter this threat must be far more substantial and far more effective, he said. Before the heat can decrease, most of the offensive installations on land in Iran would have to be eliminated. There would need to be constant monitoring, patrols, extremely close surveillance, and a very high level of intelligence to be able to say that it would be possible to allow tankers to transit even with military escorts. That will not happen at all. Not at all in the near future. Experts say another challenge will be reassuring shipping insurers and companies that navigating in Hormuz waters is feasible again. Insurance premiums for shipping in the strait have soared to levels that France's transport minister described as, quote, insane, causing, quote, a big problem for shippers. Quote, maritime traffic is a business. That business has to make money. If insurance costs are so high that you can't make a profit by sailing through a given area, then you don't sail through that area. Ship owners are not going to operate at a loss, said Ossar, now a director at the Mediterranean Foundation for Strategic Studies, a think tank. Insurance rates for oil tankers that want to transit through Hormuz are many times higher than they were before the war and are approaching levels that have been charged for ships carrying grain from Ukraine during the ongoing war with Russia, said Marcus Baker, global head of marine cargo and logistics for insurance broker and risk advisor Marsh Risk. Potential naval escorts for commercial ships, quote, would be helpful, Baker said. Quote, that's been done before in conflicts past, so that's not something unusual, and that will obviously give a degree of confidence to the insurers that the vessels are going to have a greater degree of safety, he said. So yeah, and again, none of this takes into account yet just the sheer logistics of bringing an operation back online, and of course, getting through the bottleneck of ships that might exist at that time. So this is going to be with us for some time yet. It's not going to be just a 2-3 week or 2-3 month blip. This is going to show up in the economy, and it's going to last for a decent while yet before things start to happen. And even when they do start to unwind, these increases in prices are sticky. They tend to last longer than slightly needed in case something else might happen. So things not only have to cool down, but have to cool down for a sustained period of time without interruption before some of the benefit of that cool down starts to translate back to us. So we are looking at quite a while, and given that Donald Trump still doesn't seem to know when it is, the war will end or under what conditions or how it is he's going to extricate himself from this while claiming some type of victory, of course, because Trump never loses, right? This might be tough, and it could last a lot. Like we're talking maybe even more than 6 months, up to a year, maybe more. So we're in this for a while. We're in this for a while yet. All right. What else do we have for you here? My God, I've got so much news here that I'm probably going to be going way over here. Let's see, what do we have here? Since we're talking about economic news, there is some little bits of good news for us here in Canada. One of those bits of good news is that activity at the port in St. John seems to be quite healthy, which is a good thing. The Premier of New Brunswick, Susan Holt, had made a comment about need to pay attention to the port in St. John and to make sure that it was expanded because there was more opportunity here. And according to the Financial Post's Andrew Rankin, it seems that the port is booming. Canadian manufacturers reshaping the domestic supply chain to escape tariffs imposed by the United States have discovered a faster, more reliable eastern gateway, with cargo traffic from Ontario to the port of St. John in New Brunswick soaring 153% over the past year or so. Shipments from Ontario now account for nearly a third of the port's total exports. In 2025, 8,083 20-foot equivalent unit containers left St. John, more than double the previous year, with Europe receiving about half of the containers, followed by smaller shares to Asia, the Caribbean, and the Americas. And foot equivalent unit containers are often referred to by the abbreviation TEU, in case that comes up later in the article. Much of this cargo is critical to Ontario's economy as more than 4,000 containers of automobiles, metals, and forest products from the province move directly to Europe with an estimated value of $2 billion to $3 billion. The shift comes as exporters look to hedge against UF tariffs on goods entering the American market. Shipments leaving Canada directly through St. John to Europe or other international destinations aren't subject to these charges, which is why some exporters are rerouting cargo eastward instead of going through U.S. ports. Shipping delays in major global waterways earlier this year also forced some vessels into longer routes, slowing transatlantic shipments. And that's one of the things we mentioned earlier on, or late last year, where Canada and Mexico decided that they were going to do more trade by ship and by air so that their products didn't have to cross U.S. soil in order to get around those tariffs. And when we're talking about Europe and other international markets, Mexico might be one of those other international markets that is seeing a lot of growth here. Quote, "It doesn't take much moving from north-south to east-west to be a massive change for the supply chain," Craig Bell Estabrook's Port of St. John Chief's executive said. He said tariffs and global disruptions have encouraged some shippers to look east, but that, quote, "the primary reason is that the people are just discovering the gateway, drawn in by St. John's two major railway operations, modern infrastructure, and reliability." For certain Indian Ocean markets, including Western India, St. John can be a shorter and more flexible route compared to other Canadian gateways. Recent disruptions, including delays at the Suez Canal, rerouted vessels around Africa, and conflicts in the Middle East have also slowed traffic through key shipping lanes, highlighting the advantage of having an alternative eastern port that can quickly pivot to global markets. Barry Prentice, a professor of supply chain management at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, said Ontario shippers are choosing St. John for a few obvious reasons, such as it being closer than Halifax by rail and being able to receive much larger container ships than Montreal. The port is also served by Canadian Pacific Kansas City Limited, CPKC, and Canadian National Railway Company, CN, while Halifax is only served by CN. Quote, "The competition of the two rail alternatives can only benefit Ontario shippers," he said. Prentice said St. John's growth is a positive step for market diversification and supply chain resilience, but ports do not create trade on their own. Quote, "The better an alternative port assists, but it does not create trade," he said, adding that the new market connections are ultimately what drive demand. Beyond infrastructure, U.S. trade policy may be pushing shippers east. Prentice said U.S. President Donald Trump's threats to impose port fees on foreign ships could shift shipping patterns. Quote, "If they go ahead, it would certainly make coming through St. John much more attractive to foreign shipping companies that are the majority of the carriers," he said. Exporters are also wary of the regulatory complexity involved in rerouting cargo through U.S. ports because of customs reviews, compliance costs, and potential delays. Other East Coast ports are also seeking new international routes. Last month, the French container shipping company CMA CGM added the port of Halifax to its weekly India American Express rotation, creating a direct link between Halifax and South Asian markets. Officials said the move strengthens Halifax's role as a strategic global gateway, supporting Canadian exporters seeking to diversify markets beyond the U.S. West Coast ports are also diversifying. The Vancouver Fraser Port Authority reported record cargo volumes last year, with freight up 8% to 170.4 million tons. Grain, crude oil, potash, containers, and auto shipments all hit new highs as shippers sought markets beyond the increasingly protectionist U.S. Quote, "The Port of Vancouver is playing an outsized role in delivering more made-in-Canada products to more customers globally," Chief Executive Peter Zota said. Vancouver's container expansion at the Roberts Banks terminal is poised to increase capacity by nearly a third. The federal government has introduced plans to boost non-U.S. exports by Canadian companies, but Bell Estabrook said much of the growth at St. John's Port is due to a decade-long modernization effort. Quote, "We imagined years ago what port modernization could look like," he said. "It involved pitching the government on the old Building Canada Fund and securing an original $205 million investment. That initial investment, combined with $42 million follow-up, helped deepen the main channel and more than quadrupled the port's container capacity. When DP World plc became the container terminal operator at port in 2017, it brought post-Panamax cranes, operational expertise, and stronger ties to global shipping lines, helping the port handle larger vessels and improve efficiency. The 2020 return of CPKC also gave Ontario shippers a rare dual rail option. Its network does not reach Halifax, so St. John provides a faster route to the coast that is more than 300 kilometers shorter than traditional routes. Today, with major lines such as the Hapag, Lloyd, and Maersk coming in weekly, St. John has evolved from a regional port into a deepwater alternative to the congested U.S. eastern seaboard. The port has doubled its container traffic over the past 2 to 3 years to roughly 240,000 TEUs, a surge driven by DP's hands-on commitment to the port, Jean-Paul Rodrigue, a professor of maritime business administration at Texas A&M University, said. St. John Rail Link's proximity to the U.S. Northeast and connections to Caribbean transshipment hubs give shippers flexibility over Atlantic ports give shippers flexibility other Atlantic ports can't match, he said. Quote, the numbers are telling you traffic has more than doubled, and that could capture a bit more if the trends continue, he said. The port's growth has, of course, faced challenges, with the key bottleneck being Sims Corner, where rail lines, trucks, and pedestrian converge. To ease congestion, the port is eyeing funding from the federal government's $5 billion Trade Diversification Corridors Fund. And working with JD's Irving Limited's New Brunswick Southern Railway, along with provincial and federal partners. Pardon me, I have to cough. Kids and cups. And now I unfortunately, because I had to come to the screen, there we go. I had to press the cough button. I had lost the article there, but I have it now again. They aimed to separate rail and truck traffic, a step towards increasing capacity to 1 million TEUs from the current 800,000 TEUs. The port still has room to expand its on-site acreage and rail capacity, Bell Estabrook said. Additional cranes, loaders, and intermodal yard enhancements are planned to ensure St. John can continue absorbing growth in Ontario traffic. Canada has long relied on U.S. as its main customer, but even a 5% to 10% shift to new markets marks a major change for the country's supply chain, Bell Estabrook said. Quote, the Atlantic and Pacific coasts need to be ready for potential increases, he said. Prentice said the surge is not just a local success story, but part of a broader shift in Canada's trade landscape. Vancouver handles the largest volume of container traffic in Canada, much of it bulk exports to Southeast Asia. But he said growth at the Port of St. John points to expanding opportunities on the Atlantic side. India is probably the most dynamic market in the world, and we have just completed a new trade agreement, he said. For India, the closest port is certainly not Vancouver. They are much better served by routes that come through the Suez Canal and across the Atlantic. Prentice said St. John is an ice-free port, has lots of space, and is in a good location. Quote, the only real question is, what took them so long, he said. So there you go, kids and cubs. Some good news on that front. Other good news on the front of Canadian trade and everything has to do with Canada's move to secure more options when it comes to space. One of the things that Canada will be talking about a lot is low Earth orbit satellites, or LEOs. You will hear that increasingly over the next while. And as you know, there was a while ago, I think we brought you a report that the government of Canada had signed a deal with Telesat for this purpose. And there's been some advancements on that. This is according to Sean Boyton of Global News. It says that Canada is working to launch hundreds of new communication satellites that Prime Minister Mark Carney and experts say will be, quote, fundamental to sovereign defense capabilities and autonomy from the United States. During a speech to Australia's Parliament, I think it was last Thursday, Carney highlighted a soon-to-launch made-in-Canada low-Earth orbit satellite network that could soon compete with Elon Musk's Starlink in providing far-reaching internet services. No, not last Thursday, the Thursday before that, because this is a March 7th article. That, in turn, will help with everything from military operations to natural disaster responses, experts say, particularly in the Arctic. Satellite communications are now a fundamental requirement for security and strategic autonomy, Carney said Thursday. Quote, a Canadian-based constellation of LEO satellites will launch next year to provide reliable and secure global communications. We are working with other like-minded partners who possess similar capabilities to build out a deep and resilient system we can all share and control in our own territories. The new defense industrial strategy includes space, and specifically satellite communications, as one of its 10 key sovereign capabilities that the federal government is looking to prioritize. The Prime Minister's office confirmed Carney was referencing Telesat Lightspeed, a network of nearly 200 LEO satellites that was initially set to go into orbit late this year. The project was given a $2.14 billion federal loan in 2024 to expand internet and 5G connectivity across Canada, including in remote and Indigenous communities that have long been without fast, reliable service. I will point out that was done during the Trudeau years. He saw that coming. Many of those communities have come to rely on Starlink, which has contracts with multiple provinces and territories and is currently the sixth largest internet provider in Canada, according to a 2025 report from the Global Media and Internet Concentration Project. The company operates thousands of LEO satellites with an altitude of 600 kilometers and says it delivers the same kind of service provided by larger and far more expensive medium Earth orbit GPS satellites at a fraction of the cost. Telesat sets itself apart by flying its LEO satellites at a 1,300 kilometer altitude, literally flying over the traffic jams created by the increasingly crowded low orbit area used by most other satellites. Quote, "There's a great race in the world now among private companies and countries looking to develop and launch their own LEO satellite networks," said Susan Scone, a satellite technology researcher and professor at the University of Calgary, who co-leads the Space Defense Technologies Alberta Research Project. Quote, "It's great, frankly, that Canada is being assertive about having our own capabilities, because what's not great is if someone from another country can turn that network off at will and we don't control it." In his speech, Carney alluded to restrictions Musk had placed on Ukraine's use of Starlink for its military during the war with Russia, while underscoring the importance of sovereign satellite capabilities. Canada's use of Starlink came under scrutiny last year after US President Donald Trump launched his trade war against Canada, at a time when Musk was serving as a special advisor to Trump and leading efforts to slash US government budgets and funding through DOGE. Ontario canceled a $100 million contract with Starlink as part of its retaliation against the US, and other provinces and territories said they were reconsidering their own contracts and looking at Made in Canada options. However, the Global Media and Internet Concentration Project reported that until Telesat Lightspeed comes online, Starlink remains the only realistic solution for rural and remote communities in Canada. Emma Spanswick, who co-leads the Space Defense Technologies Alberta with Scone and frequently does research projects in the Arctic, said Starlink's arrival was, quote, "a game changer for sending data back from the far north." Quote, "We still have to recover some data in these communities via hard drives," the University of Calgary physics and astronomy professor said. "We call our data recovery method Canada Post because that's actually what we use." Having a Made in Canada satellite constellation would allow Canadians rather than Americans through Starlink to determine the satellite's positions, Scone added, ensuring the Arctic and other critical communities are adequately covered. She also pointed to the wildfires in northern Canada as a real-world example of LEO satellites providing more reliable connectivity for communities and first responders. Quote, "There were wildfires in the Yellowknife area and in northern BC, which compromised two fiber links being used to connect Inuvik in terms of internet and so on," she said. "When they were compromised, some service providers had a backup and some service providers did not, and some people went without connectivity and TV for several weeks." During the wildfires last year, Starlink provided a month of free service to customers in Canada in order to receive real-time emergency information. Although LEO satellites have until recently been focused on civilian services, the researchers said countries are increasingly looking at it as a defense priority. The 2024 loan announcement for Telesat Lightspeed said that in addition to expanding internet connectivity, the network will help the federal government, quote, "bolster its satellite communications technology and support NATO and NORAD modernization." With more countries and coalitions like the European Union pursuing their own LEO networks, leaders like Carney are now looking at integrating them for seamless communications between militaries. Quote, "If we want to have forces of other nations working with us in the Arctic environment, or we go somewhere else, we want to be able to take our hardware and we don't want to have to change," Scone said. "We want it to be interoperable across what all the forces are doing." That's a big word at NATO in terms of the capabilities amongst allies. They're free to develop their own manner of delivering capabilities and being capable to do certain things, but it should be interoperable to the largest extent possible with other systems. Spanswick and Scone compared it to how civilians can move between cellular data networks and not notice a drop in service on their smartphones. Telesat is being increasingly looked at for Canada's satellite communication needs. The federal government in December signed a new strategic partnership with Telesat and MDA Space, another Canadian firm, and Telesat's primary satellite contractor to develop military satellite communications for the Canadian Armed Forces in the Arctic. The partnership is for the Enhanced Satellite Communications Project, Polar ESCPP project, which comes with a budget that exceeds $5 billion and is estimated to come online in 2037. The project is part of Canada's multi-billion-dollar NORAD modernization project. Scone said the more satellites Canada can optimize, the better, particularly if they're made and designed at home. Quote, I always say to government folks, while there are solutions that we leverage, whether it's GPS and others, they're not necessarily designed to work in the most optimal manner for Canadian geography, she said. It's wonderful to know that there will be civilian and military capabilities delivering connectivity specifically designed to be robust and secure for Canada. So there you go, looking at that. And since we are also talking about space, there was another bit of news that came out yesterday, which is really interesting because we had been talking about it on the show not too long ago. Some Cubs had brought it to my attention in the chat, but that was the talk about a spaceport here, and it seems that we mentioned that there's been a development, according to Iraine Gallia and Pippa Norman, who are innovation reporters with the Globe and Mail. It would appear that Ottawa is investing $200 million in a Canadian-owned spaceport to enable sovereign satellite launches and has selected 3 companies to receive funding from its launch grant program as part of its effort to boost Canada's space and defense capabilities and encourage new investment in the industry. Ottawa will lease a dedicated space launch pad at Spaceport Nova Scotia, the facility near Canto, Nova Scotia, being constructed by Halifax-based Maritime Launch Services. We talked about them. The Department of National Defense will pay $20 million per year over 10 years, with 90% of gross rental payments being spent in Canada to support domestic space agency. MLS is planning to build 4 launch pads, which other companies would use to send their rockets into orbit. One pad is currently operational and was used to host the company's first commercial launch last November. The dedicated D&D pad is expected to be ready for launch by the end of 2026. Meanwhile, 3 companies, Canada Rocket Company and Reaction Dynamics and Nord Space, will each receive $8.3 million non-repayable grant to develop space launch vehicles and technologies. Nord Space was another company that we had spoken of, but the other 2 are new to us in this conversation. Hopefully, if the Canto space pad constructed by Maritime Launch Services is ready by the end of 2026, maybe they would be ready in time to send those LEO satellites from the Telesat project up into space, and we can do that from home. Hopefully everything will line up. The grants are being delivered through Launch the North, a 3-year, $105 million contest operated by the Department of National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces. Last year's federal budget included $182.6 million to establish sovereign launch capability over the next 3 years. The funding and partnership were announced by Defense Minister David McGuinty in Ottawa on Monday. Quote, with this step, we are not only advancing our capabilities here on Earth, we are reaffirming our place among the spacefaring nations, shaping the future beyond it, McGuinty said in a press release. So there you go with that as well. Canada having some space as a result of what is happening there. According to Counterpoint Technology Market Research, Canada's satellite connectivity landscape is undergoing structural transformation, transitioning from traditional geostationary Earth orbit, or GEO systems, towards low Earth orbit, LEO, constellations for connectivity. This shift reflects both technological advancement and policy direction, driven by the federal government's objective to achieve universal broadband access of 50 Mbps download and 10 Mbps upload for Canadians by 2030, with the goal to deliver low latency and high-speed internet across rural and northern Canada. The transition is supported by a combination of private investment, proactive regulation, and an evolving partnership model between satellite operators and telecommunications carriers. So there you go, kids and cubs. Some good news there as well as to what we're doing to try to pivot away from the United States and ensure greater sovereignty for ourselves in the process. Last major story that I have for you today has to do with Doug Ford once again and his bid to block freedom of information searches into his government. He's going to be tabling some legislation on that front. And it would appear that Doug Ford has some excuses for what it is that he wants to do this. One of the reasons has to do with something that he has said before, and as we featured in that news clipping yesterday, or that video clip that we had from Focused Ontario, is that Doug Ford gives his cell phone number to people and asks constituents to call him directly with their problems. And to look more and more that this is a strategy that Doug Ford developed for the sole purpose of having his records searched. Because, well, you can't search my records because if you do that, you will destroy the privacy of the people who call me. And I can't have that. I need to protect the people. So he claims. I'm, yeah, that's his claim. And while it is a very no claim, it also appears to be somewhat bullshit. According to Laura Stone, of Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Ontario Premier Doug Ford is defending his government's decision to exempt him and his cabinet ministers from freedom of information requests and said he needs to keep his personal cell phone records hidden to protect the privacy of private citizens who contact him. Mr. commented for the first time Monday on his government's announcement last week that the Premier, cabinet ministers, and their offices would no longer be subject to freedom of information requests and will be able to keep documents and emails about their decision-making secret. It also means the Premier's cell phone records, which the government had been fighting in court to keep private, will remain shielded from the public. Mr. Ford regularly gives out his phone number at public events and said thousands of people text and call him expecting discretion. Quote, I was sworn to confidentiality for constituents and I'm not going to release personal confidential information about people's lives. That's what it comes down to, Mr. Ford said at an announcement in Rockville about a new correctional facility. Yeah, you also swore to uphold the public trust, do business, government business, the people's business in a means that we could access that information, and you chose not to do that. So I'm not sure. I don't think that you being sworn to confidentiality to constituents is a good enough reason. It seems more that you're more interested in confidentiality for yourself and for people you should not have been talking to on your personal phone while doing the people's business. Yeah. Quote, I have an idea. Judge me or judge our party on decisions, not on conversations that we've had in cabinet office or conversations that people trust you are not going to release. On Monday, Mr. Ford repeated his government's reasoning that I don't think somebody that has a problem with their garbage pickup, for example, when he's on City Hall, are the people that he's talking about here when he says conversations that people trust that you're not going to release. On Monday, Mr. Ford repeated his government's reasoning that the proposed changes are needed to update the, quote, antiquated 40-year-old legislation to ensure cabinet ministers can have frank conversations about policy decisions in confidence. He said the changes also align with policies at the federal level and in most provinces. Opposition parties and other critics, however, have decried the move and said it is an attempt to shield the government from scrutiny and accountability. The proposed changes follow the government's loss in a court battle over the call logs from Mr. Ford's personal cell phone, which he uses for government business. A court in January sided with the province's Information and Privacy Commissioner and ordered the records released, but the government has said it would appeal. Mr. Ford, and of course, we're going to pay for that. Mr. Ford on Monday said he receives 1,000 calls a day and has thousands of unread text messages. Quote, every personal problem people have, they call me. I feel like a psychologist every day trying to solve everyone's personal issues. That is not good to release it, he said, but nobody's asking you to release that, Doug. Stephen Crawford, Ontario's Minister of Public and Business Service Delivery and Procurement, said the government also intends to address predatory information gathering from foreign countries and companies, which Mr. Ford suggested comes from China. Ontario NDP leader Merritt Stiles said Mr. Ford is coming up with ridiculous excuses to justify his changes to the FOI system. Quote, the Premier isn't worried about China. He's worried about what the people of Ontario will see when his phone records are released, she said in a statement Monday. This is democratic backsliding, plain and simple. The Premier is making every excuse under the sun to justify changing the rules so he and his cabinet can hide from public accountability. If passed, the legislation to be introduced in the spring would quash existing and future requests for any document held in the Premier's office and the offices of any of his cabinet ministers, such as their emails, internal memos, and meeting schedules. The proposed exemptions would also cover offices of MPPs who serve as parliamentary assistants, a group that includes all but a handful of the 79 progressive conservative MPs. MPPs, I'd say, sorry. The changes could also affect other access to information battles launched by media outlets, advocacy groups, or the opposition. One of them involves a political staffer's messages related to the government's aborted attempt to remove land owned by a handful of connected developers from its protected green belt, an affair that is subject to an RCMP probe, about which we've not gotten any kind of update. Ontario's Freedom of Information watchdog condemned the exemptions. In a statement last week, Information and Privacy Commissioner Patricia Kasim called the proposal, quote, shocking and alarming, noting that existing rules protect personal and confidential information. She said the change is about hiding government-related business to evade public accountability. And she linked the move to Mr. Ford's phone recs case, quote, by changing the law retroactively, the government's message is plain. If oversight bodies get in the way, just change the rules. And yes, Doug Ford's claim about being concerned about all the people that just send them their psychology problems. There are rules already that allow for the redaction of that information prior to the things being made public. So he has no reason to be concerned about that in any way, shape, or form. Yet he claims that he Paul Champ, who's a lawyer, you might recognize that name because he was involved also in the convoy stuff. I believe he was representing Zexi Lee, one of the people who made some complaints. He said, I'm counsel on this case, abundantly clear that the personal information of constituents, etc., are private and will not be disclosed. Yet the Premier keeps raising this bogus point to keep all of his government calls secret. What is he trying to hide? Doug Ford being asked specifically here. So yeah, when Doug Ford gave that little press conference yesterday, Mr. Crawford, I believe it is, had come up and was giving an explanation for why that is, and then why it is he was making that decision. And then Doug Ford then came up on his own and then decided to go folksy and add a little bit of his own to what's going on. And I thought I had the clip for you ready to go, but it seems I do not. So I'm just looking for it here, and I can. There it is. Got it right here for you. Hopefully, it is. I just need to make sure that it is properly queued up here for you, kids and cubs. No, that's not the one. I'm gonna guess it's this one because I need the one with the clip. Either not the one. Some good reporting by Tina Yazdani, of course, but not the clip I was looking for, unfortunately. Oh, darn. Darn. I thought I had set it aside for you, kids and cubs. I will look for it over the course of the show, and hopefully and we'll be able to bring it to you here. I'm just so sorry that I don't have it with me singled out. I did a copy paste of a link, and unfortunately it recopied something that I had already pasted and not a link to the actual video, unfortunately. But yes, Doug Ford claiming that we need to protect ourselves. There it is. I finally found it. The reason why he can't, why he's passing this law, is because we need to be protected from China. So I will let this play, and then we can get back to what it is he is saying. And if you find that Doug Ford, when he does this, sounds a little bit like Donald Trump and behaves a little bit like Donald Trump, you wouldn't be incorrect. I can't do this appropriate thing that we need to do as Gina.
Front. What we are doing is ensuring cabinet confidentiality. We're aligning with the majority of jurisdictions in the rest of Canada, and we're also ensuring that foreign countries, foreign companies, which have been taking advantage of our openness through predatory information gathering, will no longer be able to. So we will do what it takes to protect the people of Ontario.
Thank you.
I think you're being too politically correct. We got to protect ourselves against the communist Chinese that are infiltrating our country, Canada, the U.S., everything into our education system, into high-tech companies. That's who we have to protect from, too. So it's serious.
Front. What
Yeah. I'm not impressed by that at all. Yes, it is true that we have some issues with China with regard to the way it gets information, but I doubt very much, very very much, that the Communist government of China is filing freedom of information requests in Ontario and politely waiting 3 years or so to have them responded to in order to find a way to sabotage us on intellectual property. I have a feeling that the Communist government of China, when it does do that, which is alleged of it, has much more sophisticated means to do that than to file freedom of information requests. I have a feeling that that's the type of work that is done surreptitiously, not out in the open. Yes, foreign companies and foreign governments are allowed to file freedom of information requests according to our system. But I doubt that that's the type that type of proprietary information is the type of information that would not already be redacted if it was included in such documents and would not be revealed. So yeah, Doug Ford with his own Red Scare. I can't show you those things because it will betray the confidence of everybody who writes to me. Those things can be redacted. Well, we have to do it because of the Chinese. Yeah. Where's the bee when you need one? That was just dumb. I mean, that was literally just dumb. Kit Linda. Ooh, can we ask China to give us Dougie's phone history? And of course, back Dougie into a corner and you'll find some racism and misogyny. Yep. Yep. So yeah, we're not allowed to know what's in Doug Phone's records because China. Yeah, Doug Trump. Trump or Ford, however it is you want to call him. But yeah, Donald Trump. And of course, this is after him stating that, of course, he was leading one of the most transparent governments in Ontario history or something of the sort, claiming that he has absolutely nothing to hide, right? All of this is for the good of the people. All of this is to allegedly protect Ontario. But Doug Ford wants you to believe he has nothing to hide. Come on. Come on. Doug Ford, It's not pulling a rabbit out of your hat. We're just duplicating what other jurisdictions across the province have, he said. We got to protect ourselves against the communist Chinese that are infiltrating our country, Canada, the US, everything into our education system, into high-tech companies. That's who we have to protect from too. So it's serious. Jeez. Oh my God. Business Minister Stephen Crawford admitted Ontarians would have access less internal information after the laws passed, but he downplayed that. I should have everybody know that over 95% of what you're able to access now, you will still be able to access, said the minister, who did not elaborate on how he arrived at that percentage. Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. Green leader Mike Schreiner said Ford was dodging accountability before the legislature resumes sitting next Monday. Doug Ford, who has nothing to hide, of course, backed that up by telling Ontarians that the details of the settlement for the scuttled Starlink deal will also have to remain secret. According to Liam Casey of the Canadian Press, Ontario's payout to Elon Musk's SpaceX over a cancelled Starlink contract will remain a secret. Two sides agreed to a conflict Canadian Press has learned. Again, I do not know why governments who settle in our name and maybe make a cash payout get to keep confidential how much the settlement or what the terms of the settlement are. The province said the kill fee for what was set to be a $100 million deal is significantly less than the contract value, and the amount paid out was part of a negotiated settlement. And I guess we'll just have to take their words for it, because they don't lie at all, and because they are so transparent. When asked about the kill fee earlier this week, Ontario Premier Doug Ford said he didn't know the amount, but pledged to confirm it. His office then said that the amount could not be publicly released. Oh, I don't know what it is. It's significantly less than the contract value, but I don't know what it is, but I can confirm it for you. Oops, sorry, that information cannot be publicly released. Ford stands by his choice to kill the deal before it was implemented. Quote, I believe that it was the right decision protecting Canadians, not supporting a U.S.-led owner that was pretty aggressive towards Canada, he said on Tuesday. As the host of the show, the narrator voice comes on, as the host of the show sips water while remembering that his $750 thing for teachers and office supplies went to American company Staples. And so did a certain Service Ontario centers when they were relocated. Some of them went into Staples. But yes, we should support a U.S.-led owner. SpaceX did not respond to a request for comment. Days after U.S. President Donald Trump won the 2024 election, Infrastructure Minister Kinga Surma announced the deal with SpaceX to deliver high-speed internet to 15,000 households and businesses in northern and rural Ontario. Ford posted about the deal on X, the social media platform owned by Musk, who responded with, cool. Musk went to great lengths to support Trump's presidential bid. Two senior Ontario government sources said in November 2024 the Starlink deal was in part seen as a positive move designed to appease Trump's inner circle. At the time, Ford supported Trump. Ford was later caught on a hot mic at a campaign event for a Snap Ontario election. He called for February 2025, saying he was initially happy Trump won the presidential election before souring on him due to his threats to annex Canada through economic force. The sources who were granted anonymity in order to speak freely about the deal said the Starlink system was the only one that could be operational within months of signing the deal and had proven its technology after a trial run in Pikangikum First Nation in 2020. SpaceX won the competitive bid, but the province said at the time and planned to be SpaceX won the competitive bid, the province said at the time, and planned to be operational by June 2025. The program, dubbed ONSAT, which stands for Ontario Satellite Internet, would have covered equipment and installation costs, but not monthly user fees. The deal would also guarantee internet coverage priority over the average paying Starlink customer. Remote First Nations in Northern Ontario were set to benefit the most from the deal. First Nations and mining exploration companies across Northern Ontario are now using Starlink on their own dime to connect to the grid. The province is also laying fiber optic cable throughout the remote First Nations in Northern Ontario and vast parts of rural Ontario. The cable has already been laid or strung up in many parts around the Ring of Fire, including Neskatanga First Nation and Wepikwi First Nation, though internet is not yet operational. Both the Starlink deal and the broadband project were part of the province's $4 billion plan to deliver high-speed internet to every corner of Ontario. Ford's office said they are, quote, identifying a suitable alternative partner. Quote, once Trump brought Musk closer into his orbit after the inauguration, the billionaire, who has Canadian citizenship through his Regina-born mother, began mimicking the president's verbal attacks on Canada. Quote, Canada is not a real country, Musk wrote on X in February 2025. Musk and Trump have had a rocky relationship over the last year, allegedly. After Trump launched his war against Canada in March 2025, Ford responded with a series of retaliatory measures. The premier pulled U.S. booze off Liquor Control Board of Ontario shelves, placed a surcharge on power exported to Michigan, Minnesota, and New York for one day, and pulled the Starlink deal. The secrecy over the Starlink cancellation fee bothers Liberal parliamentary leader John Fraser. Taxpayers deserve to know how much they've given to Musk's company, he said. Quote, we should have been looking at a Canadian company like Telesat that was doing the same work and that would have protected jobs here in Ontario. But the premier wasn't thinking about it at the time, he said. It blew up in his face, and now we're all paying the price. Just tell us how much we gave over to this billionaire. And we should have a right to know that. Whether or not Doug Ford just gave him the $100 million anyway, and is just claiming that the settlement was less, or whether or not it was a token financial settlement. But we have the right to know. And Doug Ford, most transparent premier Ontario has ever had, according to himself. That's another thing that we're not allowed to know, apparently. Well, have a feeling that he's going to be having some trouble. Some public opinion polling is indicating that Doug Ford, even though a lot of polls are indicating that he still has some double-digit leads, that it's not going well for him, that he too is seeing some sharp declines in the public opinion polling that has been coming his way. I think it is Liaison is showing the closest link, not the closest link, I should say, the closest spread between the Liberals and himself. According to Liaison polling, it was PC plus 14 on November 15th, and then PCs plus 9 on December 6th, and now it's PCs plus 4, according to February 21st. They're the only one that's showing that close. But if you're looking at other ones, however, Angus Reid was showing PCs plus 20 on September 1st, and their most recent poll that they have is November 28th, and showing that PCs to plus 13. So there was a 7-point drop there. It would be interesting to see what a more recent poll from them puts out. Palace data had progressive conservatives up 19 in September, and then up 17 in November, and now is showing up 13 in January. So a 6-point drop for them in that period of time. And Abacus was showing conservatives up 28% in November, up 26% in January, and then up 14% in February. So a 12-point drop. So there is movement away from the PCs in Ontario. A lot of the polling companies are still showing healthy advantages. And the polling aggregator 338 still shows that there's a 99% chance of a Doug Ford majority win should he once again declare a snap election. But if Liaison is to be believed, that wouldn't be the case, because Liaison is indicating progressive conservatives at 40, Liberals at 36, without a leader so far, and the New Democrats at 17. So the shine may be falling from Doug Ford. People may be starting to have enough of him as well, and stuff like this is certainly not going to help him. All right. I think that is all that I have for you today, kids and cubs. Yes, especially since we're way over time. So that's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us, because we love making this for you. Remember that sharing is caring, and word of mouth is priceless. So please tell your peeps and poops all about us. We really appreciate it when you do, especially when you include a little bit of yourself in there, saying why does our content resonates with you. That's advertising we can't buy. So thank you for your help with that. And if you would like to help us in other ways, one of the ways you could do that, Kids and Cubs, is by scanning this QR code. If you are not already watching on our YouTube page, that will bring you there. And if you are there, could you please take a moment to click on our subscribe button if you haven't already, as well as our like and share buttons. But the subscribe button in particular, those help us with the algorithm and help people find us. So the more people that subscribe, the better it is. And we thank you so very much. Of course, like and share also helps people find us as well. And when the more a show is liked, the more I think the more it starts to pop up in an algorithm. So if you can take the time to click on the like and share buttons, we would be very, very grateful for that help too. If you are able to help financially, that would mean the world to us because we do incur some costs to bring this show to you. So if you like what we do and you would like to encourage us to do more, that QR code will bring you to our coffee page, or as we affectionately call it, the Eager Beaver Lodge Emergency Hydration Fund, where you can help us fight the scourge that is dry beaver, because a moist beaver is a very happy beaver. And if you would like to do your bit to keep your favorite beaver moist by buying him, let's say, an Add a Beaver cup of chocolate to help him get through the workday, then he would be very grateful for that. And Mr. Grizzly would be equally as grateful if you treated him to a cup of black coffee, black like a soul, like he likes to say. But we all know that he's a good egg. But if you scan that QR code, it will bring you there. And we have at our coffee page options to have a one-time donation or a recurring donation. If you would like to treat it sort of like a membership, we would be very happy to receive your donation, and we thank you so very much. Of course, when you donate through coffee, we get 95 to about 97% of your donation. We have memberships and super chat on our YouTube page, which makes it such that we receive about 70% of your donation. And if you are doing the Buy Canadian thing at Kits and Cubs, because you do not want any of your donation to go to a USCE tech bro, then a bank-to-bank transfer makes sure that your transaction is entirely Canadian, and we get 100% of your donation. So that is the most win-win-win option that we have. But we have all these various options for you to be able to donate in the manner that is most convenient to you. And if you are not able to donate Kits and Cubs financially, please, you can make a contribution of another kind by also using our email address, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com, to let us know what you think about the show, good, bad, or ugly, some guest suggestions for our interview project segments, or, of course, participating in the Kits Who Cook hashtag if you're making something yummy, or Kits Who Craft if you are artistically inclined and making something just lovely. We'll want to know what it is. And of course, if you have some personal good news that you would like to share to help us get through the day of doom scrolling and give us a little refresher and a pick me up, we would love that too. So please use our email address to communicate with us. We love hearing from you. And of course, you can comment down here on our YouTube page if you are watching on any of our socials at True Eager, at the Blue Sky, and on the Jitter sites that we are present on. Of course, True North Eager Beaver on Facebook, our original home. We also have an Instagram, and we also have the Damn Fam Discord that I'm sure somebody will put a link to in the chat so that you can enjoy all of that and keep the conversation going between shows, and to have some Damn Fam time as well, because they're a wonderful group of people, the best Damn Fam in all of podcasting. So why wouldn't you want to spend more time with them, right? Very interesting people, beautiful people too. I see you out there. Looking fine. All right, Kits and Cubs. Let's see. Because democracy is something that you do, Kits and Cubs, by-elections on the 13th, of course. Please make your plan to vote in Scarborough Southwest, University Rosedale, and Terrebonne. Of course, if you are an NDP voting member, we have the NDP leadership race. The voting is on now. If you're voting by mail, make sure it is mailed in time to get there to be counted on the 29th. And if you are in Winnipeg for the convention, you can vote in person on the 29th. Some very important stuff going on there. We have the public consultation for the high-speed rail, altotrain.ca, which continues till the 29th. We have House of Commons petition E7148, which calls upon the House to require all federal party leaders to obtain and maintain top secret security clearance to ensure they are fully informed of threats to Canada's national security and able to act decisively to protect Canadians and our democracy. And I'm going to put that here in the chat for you, kids and cubs. There you go, so that you can go to that. As I mentioned yesterday, we have crossed the 40,000 mark. We are now at 40,583 signatures, so let's keep that growing. And there was a little bit of an online skirmish yesterday between Bruce Fanjoy and Dimitri Sudas. And Bruce Franjoy was promoting his petition, stating over 40,000 people have already signed the petition requiring all federal party leaders to see and maintain top security clearance. How many will it take to convince the lone leader who refuses? And then Dimitri Sudas decided to be a bit of a smartass and say, can you kindly give us the latest numbers of how many of your constituents you have fired? And then Bruce Franjoy responded with, I fired one. But I understand he found employment in Battle River Crowfoot. Thanks for asking. And then Dimitri Sudas, not realizing that he had his butt gift grafted and served back to him, decided to keep it going. He said, yes, the rumor in Ottawa now is that you enjoyed it so much that you're apparently planning to fire another 40,000 because conservatives are the ones that care about how many public servants remain employed. The conservatives, the worst bosses in the world, who keep on spending the time trashing the public servants that work for them, suggesting that they are bloated and fat cat and lazy and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of them, they're not useful, and a lot of them should go all the time. Now, trying to pretend that they care about 40,000 public servants that might be fired in whatever downsizing or cost adjustments that we are doing. And of course, to that, Bruce Franjoy decided not to respond because there is no one more sad than an ignored attention whore. We had the lovely Lisa Cloud, I use that term loosely, stating, Dimitri, Bruce's inability to be gracious towards Pierre. The rest of it doesn't matter because with whom is Pierre ever gracious? And of course, they kept on feeding each other with this for a couple of extra exchanges to try to get this going, where they both blew, where he blew a lot of sunshine up her backside. Let's put it this way. So yes, conservatives still feeling like they can be smug, despite the fact that things are not going very well. A couple of other little bit of democracy news before we go that you might want to be aware of, kids and cubs. Number one is that if you happen to be living in British Columbia, there is also a race going on for the leader of the BC Conservatives. And it seems that two candidates have dropped out of that race, according to the Canadian press. The number of candidates running for the leadership of the British Columbia Conservatives has shrunk to 7. Bruce Banman and Harman Bangu, both members of the provincial legislature, have dropped out of the race. Banman said he is endorsing candidate Yuri Fulmer because the entrepreneur is the only candidate, quote, with a proven track record in the private sector who knows how to kickstart the economy. Bangu has shown his support behind Caroline Elliott, says he agrees with her ideas about, quote, common sense in schools, prosperity for working families, and respect for private property. Also still running are contractor Warren Ham, former Save on Foods executive Daryl Jones, former MP Carly Lynn Findlay, former BC Cabinet Minister Ian Black, and current MLA Peter Milabar, who is now the only sitting legislator vying for the leadership of the official opposition. Milabar says on social media that he is the only candidate who, quote, who would win a strong, clear majority government, pointing to recent polling. The remaining candidates must pay $40,000 by April 1st and another $60,000 on or before April 18th to remain in the race, with the leader to be announced on May 30th. So there you have it, kids and cubs. A little bit of additional democracy news going on here for those of you who are looking for that. I thought I had another piece for you with regard to that, but I don't think I had set it aside. So that's what I have for you at the moment with regards to democracy being something that you do. Kids and cubs, words of wisdom. I'm going to say today, if you have the opportunity to get out there and move a little, it might be a good time for that with all the heaviness of what's going on in the public sphere. Just maybe getting out and giving your body a little shake, having a nice raw walk, or if you play any sports, or if you haven't been to the gym for a little bit, if that's something that you do, or something like that, might be a good time for that. Just get connected back with your body and feel good a little bit, or just do something fun. Just to go out and do something fun. Just, you deserve some fun. Yes. So yeah, keep limber, keep moving, and have a little fun. Those are my words of wisdom for today. It can be a tough world out there, kids and cubs, so please be kind to and gentle with yourself. And now, at the count of 3, may I please hear you say, Mr. Beaver, please cue the cock. 1, 2, 3, here we go. Oh, yes, that is the good stuff right there. You did that with, and because you did, I must oblige. Here's a little cock-a-doodle-doo just for you. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music. All right, kids and cubs. No news today on Canadians who make us proud, only because I didn't set anything aside. But just a little update on the Fill the Stands program here. I'm not sure. It's showing that every seat has been claimed. I don't know if that's just because the campaign has now closed, but it is showing 14,166 seats purchased for a total of 354,165 raised to date. I think that might be the final number. So if you did contribute to that, thank you for that very much, kids and cubs. And with that, I say amour et bisous. And I will see you tomorrow morning. Bye, everyone.